So I think let's get started with some of
Yep,
these questions. We're going to be chatting for a little bit.
for sure.
People can join, but let's impart some value, hopefully, upon this crowd. So for everybody that's joining, thank you for coming in. We're going to be chatting about a couple different stocks today and a little bit about how they pertain to Market Madness. For those who are unfamiliar with Market Madness, it is a March Madness styled tournament for stocks, ETF, and cryptos that I've been running on my page. In fact, if you want to vote, go to my pinned tweet. There's several polls up today. You can vote for like SE versus PLTR. That's a big one that people have been fighting over today. And the goal has been to figure out what's the social sentiment behind stocks and how does that correlate to fundamentals and to DNA of stocks. So Gannon and I today we're going to be talking about PENN and Square. Both of them were challengers inside of Market Madness. Square had a massive matchup yesterday against DMTK, backed by Jonah Lupton. However, the Square Bulls came through. They were able to pull it off just by a few votes. That poll got over 200,000 people seeing it. So that was pretty fascinating to see that social sentiment. And then Penn unfortunately got knocked out by DMTK in the previous round, so it was kind of avenged by Square. But Penn's a personal favorite of mine. Pretty bullish. Been in it since about $6 and Gannon has some thoughts on it too. But let's kick things off with Square because Square is the one that's still in here. So just before, like, as we get into this, Gannon, explain to us when you look at Square, what is the DNA of the company? What are the fundamentals that make you look at this and say, okay, I could hold this for 5 to 10 years?
First off, I want to say, well, thank you for having me in this space. Secondly, I want to say, the classic, this is all opinions. It's not professional advice. I am a shareholder of Square. I'm not an outright shareholder of Penn. I do own Penn, though, through the Roundhill ETF BETZ, BETZ, which is a great ETF in my opinion. So getting back to your question, Square, is not an easy company to cover because it's really multiple businesses in one, in my opinion. First off, you have the managed payments and the Cash App. So those are kind of you could say those are kind of two companies, right? Um, Square started off as a payment processor where you would go into a coffee shop and there would be what looked like an iPad type thing, and that's how Square started. Then it became kind of this plumbing for small business. Um, then they acquired Cash App, and Cash App has really taken off, the competitor to Venmo, um, and really has taken on this whole new crypto exposure as well. Why I like Square in a nutshell is that it's revolutionizing small businesses. In many ways, I kind of see it as like Shopify to Amazon, in which Square is like Square to Chase Bank. Hopefully that makes any sense, but hopefully that answers your first question just very basically.
Yeah, that's a nice way to think about it from the start. And also, just to the listeners, as people are coming in, we have about 35. If you are interested in learning more about Square, about Penn, we would really appreciate if you went ahead and just shared this space with your audience. I know I got several of the boys are in here, Max, Alex, Lamonti. If anybody can just go ahead and hit that share button, it's on the bottom right of your space. That'll allow you to either just share via tweet or to copy link. Maybe just drop that to your audience. That way, just more people can come in and we can all learn together. Maybe we'll take some questions from people at the end. Who knows? But I think that was a good intro to what Square started as. So now let's talk about what's happening next. Square has ventured into Bitcoin. They have competed with Venmo. What's the next steps for them? And specifically with Jack running both of that company as well as Twitter, how do they continue to capitalize and remain a strong growth company?
It's pretty incredible to me that Jack is running both of these companies. In a perfect world, I don't really think that that Jack should be trying to run Square and Twitter at the same time. But my vision for Cash App specifically is right now. I have a main job. I work 30 days on, 30 days off on a ship, and as a merchant mariner, and we get a payment invoice essentially about 6 to 7 days before we're actually paid. In my opinion, that's ridiculous. I think you should get paid right after you work. And I really think that's Jack Dorsey's vision. And he has hinted at it, in which he wants Cash App to be integrated with Square, in which your small business, if you use Square, your payment system for your employees is going to be through Cash App. Um, it hasn't fully been integrated yet, but he has made that very obvious that that's his intention. And this is really just going to shake up everything. Um, Now, the bear stance against that is, well, as a small business, do you want that? That's a question as a small business owner that I think you have to answer yourself. Depending on what type of business you run, it might be hard to pay employees, at the end of the day. But I really think as an employee, at least I know I would love to get paid, daily, right? Especially through something so easy such as um, through an app like Cash App, very Venmo like app. And there's still, so many jobs out there that are paid through checks and all these ridiculously archaic methods. And I really think that's the direction that Jack's going. Along with that, Cash App has just been really killing it in the Bitcoin space, making it very easy for people to buy Bitcoin. And as we've seen with Coinbase, massive jump in valuation, which, I mean, I'm going to pat myself on the back. I called it, but everyone called it. I mean, this was the easiest thing to guess, really, that coin, ticker symbol coin, was just going to have a huge jump in valuation right before, listing, because, they're really holding the keys. You can charge what you want. Coinbase has not the most competitive fees. People who are really into the crypto space choose other brokerages, but Cash App is taking it off the top when you buy Bitcoin through their app.
Certainly, they've moved in a lot of different directions, and at a perfect time, right? Crypto is fresh, relatively, from my expectations of where it's going to continue to go. Now, let's delve a little bit more into. No, yeah. Sorry, I heard a little bit of feedback there. I just want to delve a little bit more into some of the fundamentals. So, talk to me about, I guess, three things. First off, I like to be transparent on here and just talk about my positions and what are larger positions. So, I know that you're transparent as well. Is Square one of your larger positions?
Yeah, it is. It's both in my Roth IRA and it's also in my personal account. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what percentage. I mean, it changes every day, but yeah, I would say it's one of my larger positions for sure.
Okay. And being with that, I'm sure that you keep up with some of these fundamentals, right? The financials that are going on behind the scene. I know that you were telling me that you were reading through those 10 Qs and through those other items. What have you seen over the past,
Right.
let's say, 4 to 8 quarters as a trend within their financials? Where are the revenues moving, the costs moving, the research? Where are they putting the money
Hmm.
and where is the money coming back to them?
Yeah. So, revenue, uh, quarter four of 2020 is 140%, opposed to quarter four of 2019, which was, 40%. And we can even dive back to 2018, which was 51%. Cost of goods sold was almost 200% in 2020 quarter four, and back in 2019 is 42%. So this is your classic high growth company. They're spending a lot of money, no doubt about it. I think Mark Hook said it best when he said, "I'm not interested in a company that isn't very overvalued." I wouldn't say I am that far into it, but Square just interests me because yes, they're very high growth, but I see so much potential in the things that I talked about just before this. Um,
Oh,
Moving forward, we have cash.
I was just
Sorry.
going to make a note real quick to my analyst Josh. Make sure you write down what he just said about Mark Cook saying what type of companies he's looking for, because I'm going to throw that out as a tweet later. Continue, Gannon.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's
Just
a
curious.
fantastic one.
Okay, okay. I'm probably gonna get some slack for that from it. He's gonna be like, "Hey, why did you say that?" um. Anyways, but we're still at a negative 24.8% net income for quarter four. If we, move over to the annual year-over-year growth, it's about negative 43%. So, this is a classic growth story where they're spending a lot of money, but they're acquiring, a lot of users. So, especially with their Cash App. Hopefully that
Certainly.
answers your question. I
Yeah.
kind of just ramble when it
Yeah.
comes to these things.
What about in their R&D department? What's the money been like there? Are they putting a lot of money towards it? Are they escalating that? Have you looked into the breakout of where the R&D is going? Sorry, I know I'm getting a little
Yeah,
nitty gritty
yeah.
here.
No, yeah. So, you know, actually, what's funny is with their R&D, it's kind of stayed the same. Quarter four was 31%. The last quarter before that was in the 30s. So it seems that they're stabilizing on that front. Back in 2014, it was higher. It was much higher actually. It was around the high 70s. Um, so it seems maybe that they're more focused on acquiring users, but they're figuring out how to save more money. Um, Now, what they're actually spending on, I need to do more, I guess, my homework on that. I'm more focused on kind of like the future aspects of it. But when it comes to actually what they're spending on, I don't know the answer to that, to be
Yeah,
honest.
no worries. All right, so everybody who's listening, we just heard a little bit about the fundamentals and the finances. And just real quick, before we move on to social sentiment, Lamonti did tweet at us. And if anybody's in the crowd, if there's something that you want to ask us or you want one of our thoughts on, feel free to just go ahead and at myself at Gannon on any tweet or just throw it in my DMs. I'm constantly checking my DMs; they're always open. But what Lamonti said, I got to find this. There's been a lot of notes. Okay, here we go. He said if the frequency of payments, paychecks, does ramp up, it could have huge implications for the velocity of money and personal debt load as the lag between incomes shrinks. What do you think about that?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I think the number one thing that comes to mind when it comes to the velocity of money and really the frequency of paychecks is like I always want to, when I get my paycheck, is I want to figure out how much I can put into my into my brokerage account, right? Um, so you could see that, a lot of people might be spending a lot more. I could see that as a possibility. A lot of times, before I get my paycheck, I kind of make a list of things I want to purchase for the end of the month. And then I get my paycheck and I go, actually, I don't need those things. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily a good thing that someone would get paid every day through a Cash App through their business provider their employer that has Square and is integrated with Cash App. But I think it could change a lot of things. I think there's pros and cons, definitely.
Love it. So now let's talk about social sentiment because for anyone who's unfamiliar, the entirety of Market Madness is actually decided via Twitter poll. It's all social sentiment. I literally post and say, vote for the asset that you like better. And I use asset because we have stocks, cryptos, ETFs, things like that. So we just had the Square poll yesterday. Like I said, this poll with over
Yeah.
200,000 impressions. It went up against DMTK. Jonah Lupton obviously got about 530,000 followers, was backing DMTK. Several guys were backing the other side. And Square, although it came down 50%, Twitter gave it the victory, probably because Jack's the CEO, but I can't confirm or deny that. And what I'd like to know from you, Gannon, is Square, despite going up against DMTK, which had Jonah, I think, twice retweeted it, still won that.
Yeah.
What's the sentiment behind Square? How is it so powerful, and why do people love it so much on the internet?
I think they multiple things, but number one thing, I think it has a possibility of turning the whole banking system on its head, right? Um, I'm really only interested, for the most part, not every investment I make. I own over well over 20 positions, but a lot of my positions are around the sentiment in a way in which I want to own companies that have the opportunity to flip an industry on its head, and Square has that opportunity. You also have a CEO who, whether you like him or not, he's kicking ass and taking names. Um, Twitter's share price is exploded, and Square's obviously. Another thing is, you know, I think people are really bullish on Square is because they have that Bitcoin aspect to it. You have these companies, obviously Tesla, MicroStrategy, and now Square. They're putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I believe it was $120 million worth in October, and then they added more. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but Jack is a Bitcoin bull through and through. I mean, I think he has hashtag Bitcoin in his in his Twitter bio. And so, this is kind of in a way and also a Bitcoin play. A lot of people own MicroStrategy. Their stock's been exploding because how much Bitcoin has performed. I don't know if you want to own MicroStrategy for the company anymore, honestly, because they own so much Bitcoin. It's like, is it even about
It
MicroStrategy
is
anymore?
not.
Is
It
it
is
even
a
about
Bitcoin
what they
holding company.
Yeah, exactly. I don't necessarily think Square should do that in any aspect. But you have these different streams of interest coming in. You have people who are bullish on Bitcoin that, oh, this is another way that I can kind of be bullish on Bitcoin by owning Square. Then you have people who are very bullish on Cash App. Oh, wow, I use this Cash App. It's so easy to send money to each other. Oh, I can actually invest in things. I can actually own Bitcoin through my Cash App. So that brings interest, to own Square. You have people who are bullish on Twitter and they go, I like Twitter. I like what Jack Dorsey's doing. Oh, he also owns Square. What's this all about? And then of course you have the bread and butter of the business. You got, small businesses who use Square, 365, 24/7.
Definitely. So we do have another question from the crowd. So first off, I just want to say I fully agree
Yeah.
with that. I think that, like you said about Jack, he's got a lot of popularity. He's got a lot of push on here. I think he's not one of the more hated CEOs. He's certainly not a Zuck. So he's doing something right.
Right.
I'm going to take this question real quick and throw it at you. And then we're going to actually look ahead to their next matchup because Square is either going to match up against SE or PLTR. So that'll come in just a
Yeah.
second. But real quick question from Tim. Thank you, Tim, for all these questions. They're always so precise. Tim asked, can we talk about the precision of transactions in retail versus POS and e-commerce and how that helps with consumer targeting and advertising? Essentially, he's talking about the early stages with Square, how banks have mass transactions once paid through normal cards and cash, but Square gets precise data on transactions down to SKU, etc. So basically just the precision of transaction in retail versus traditional e-commerce. And I guess you're getting more data. How does that factor into Square's viability and profitability as a company?
Man, that's a loaded question. There was a lot of words that I didn't even know in there. You got to remember, guys, I'm a normal person. I'm not a. So can you break
Let's
that down? That question
let's
just a
bring
little
can
bit
we bring
more.
Tim up as a speaker for a second?
Yeah, for sure. Here, I'll bring him in here.
I hope he'll come up and just ask it because honestly,
And if you guys are mad that I don't know that the question, at least have at least give me props for having the honesty to say I don't know the
yeah,
answer.
I wanted
Right?
to bring him up because here we go. Tim, you can probably ask it better than I did.
Yeah. Break that down a little bit. I don't know exactly what the question is.
So one thing that I've been kind of researching with Square, so they have obviously their point of sale system. So in retail, as well as it kind of masks and kind of merges into e-commerce transactions that are also through payments, both on retail and e-commerce. So normal companies like Visa and MasterCard, they get transaction data, but it's normally just tying a customer to a particular transaction and store that they bought things from. Square is kind of, creating an environment that you're actually able to get very detailed, granular data. And I just think that they're going to be able to utilize this for, to kind of, create a more robust advertising consumer marketing campaign for their users, especially in enterprise. Just talk about that a little bit in terms of Square being able to get down to the SKU level as opposed to some of these other banks and credit cards that are really only able to, mask their transaction and tie a customer to a store, for instance, and dollar amount.
Yeah. So are you including Cash App in this question?
Yes.
Or strictly Square?
Well, it's pretty much on the enterprise
Square
side.
Is Cash App, but yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much on the enterprise side, but Square has the ability to kind of mesh a user into like the ecosystem of a particular company as well. So mostly talking about enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I guess I'm kind of getting where your question's kind of going, is that when with Square, you're able to pick up more data points, kind of in the same way
Correct.
like Facebook. So I have a very good friend who has a 6-figure e-commerce store through Shopify, and I tell you what, it is everything has to do with data points. It is absolutely scary, actually, how much data points that Facebook has on you, on everybody, in which you have a Facebook ads manager, and essentially what it's doing is you're trying to figure out what's the best way to monetize your product on Instagram or Facebook, yada, yada, yada. And it heavily relies on these data points. So, yeah, I think Square has a big advantage in the aspect where, I guess through their transactions, they can kind of figure out, okay, no, this is what this like person is specifically buying.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Cash App, if they can figure out what you would be sending money for. Possibly, maybe there's some data that and here's the big thing, there's a big curtain. There's a lot of things that just people don't know that these companies can do, especially with Facebook, especially with Shopify, especially with these e-commerce sites. You would be shocked at whether you call it illegal or not, it's happening, how much these data points are kind of intrusive on your space. Like, for instance, my friend, he doesn't do this, but he knows people that does this, that have programs in which he can analyze the mouse movements on their store. So like when someone goes on their store to buy an item, he knows where their mouse moves first to what, hovering over what product, down to that level. Now, with Cash App, maybe there's ways in which, like Venmo, Venmo has a time, a news feed, right, where when you send someone money, you can like literally say what you're giving them. Maybe there's something along those lines with Cash App in the future, or I guess that's ways that you can find new data points. But in reality, that is the name of the game for most tech companies, is picking up every data point that they can. And who knows, is Square could possibly be selling those data points to other people.
Yeah, I think the advertising is not talked about enough because it's fairly not something that people normally focus in on, and normally that's for the enterprise and not Cash App. I can envision them trying to find a cross-reference match to kind of create that holistic view of somebody's financial journey, right? So tying in transactions to peer-to-peer payments through the Cash App and things of that nature. But I thought just the precision of data that they're getting from an enterprise perspective through their point of sale platform, tying both retail and e-commerce transactions to a user and getting down to really a granular level, so that they can not only target that individual, but also kind of mask it into demographics and trends, and be able to kind of create a robust advertising network.
Yeah, I mean, even like Amazon, Amazon is one of the biggest people trying to get your data. But this kind of sparked my memory with what Wolf asked before. What do you think is like the biggest sentiment? I really do think Square's biggest reason for their growth in their stock price is seriously been because of Cash App. I mean, we had monthly active customers at 36 million in December 2020, opposed to 24 million in 2019, 15 million in 2018, 7 million in 2017. So, you're seeing a lot of growth. Gross profit, 804 million, up 52%. Cash App, 377 million, up 162%. So, there's a lot, like Cash App is on the biggest growth swing right now. And that's just helping Square in so many ways.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. Really appreciate it. I have to go though, but keep it up. Great work.
No, thank you, Tim. And seriously, thank you for that question. That's, very specific question. I wish I could, if I was given that question yesterday, I would have done a little bit more homework on it. But that was a very thought provoking.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yep.
Gannon, I know that we were gonna try to condense this conversation. We might have to do PENN on another because I'm getting more DMs about Square. Real quick, if you
Okay.
want to,
Yeah.
if
No
you want to,
worries.
getting more DMs about Square. Real quick, if you
Okay.
want to,
Yeah.
if
No
you want to
worries.
bring up, do you see Couch Investor in the crowd? If you
Yeah.
want to bring up Couch, yeah,
Let me.
Couch Investor for just a second. They have some data that might
Okay.
be helpful for the conversation. They're just going to speak for a minute or two.
Yeah, Couch, go for it. It's connecting.
Perfect. And yeah, these conversations always just add up. Here we go. What's up, Couch? Listed as a speaker for me.
You might be muted. Couch, is your mic on?
Sometimes, trust me, if it doesn't work and it glitches and you can't, we can't hear you. I'm the right person to tell.
Yeah, I can't
There we go.
hear
Oh, perfect.
you, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Now they can't hear us.
Yeah, I'm gonna put.
I'm just letting them know that we can hear them. They can drop some knowledge, and I'll be quiet once they talk. We had a Twitter bug tester
All right,
in
so hopefully
here.
everybody can hear me. So interestingly, I just stumbled upon a research that ARK Invest did in 2019 regarding Square and traditional banks and lenders. So they say that Square has over 300,000 data points when analyzing their customers. So the way that can help them, obviously the people that use Square or Cash App, is basically Square can tell them, look, we see that this month you have an increase in sales. Maybe you want to use our marketing systems, software, etc. to accelerate your business and grow even further. And then the next step will obviously be approval of loans, which is much faster for Square. They say here it's at 7 minutes compared to 60 to 90 days via traditional lenders and banks. And regarding Cash App and getting your pays upfront, I think there is something already available, but don't quote me on that. I think it's around $200 to $500 2 days before the end of the month. So they're already working on that. Just wanted to add that information regarding the data points. Hopefully you all heard that.
Yeah, again, any thoughts on that?
that was great, Couch. I know you probably can't hear us, but no, it totally makes sense. Square, not excluding Cash App. It's a virtual terminal. It has e-commerce. It has invoices, payroll, capital, appointments, loans. So there's so many data points that you can have, along with just the transaction systems that they have as well, which I think most people are, when they think of Square originally, they think of like walking up to the coffee shop and seeing the Square transaction system. I don't know what the exact name of it is. I'm blanking. But where you swipe your card and such. But I think in the future, people are going to just think of Square in the same way, or at least my hope is people are going to think of Square as, when they hear the word Chase Bank, what do you think of Chase Bank? My hope and my bullish bet is people are going to say Square and they're going to think, the Chase Bank of small business.
Yep. So last question on Square from the technical side, and then we're just going to hit on social sentiment. Is coming from Will Griffith. So thanks for the question. Will asked, how do you reconcile the stock price performance of Square in the last 12 months, which has obviously grown massively, versus the muted growth in their total payment volume?
Reconcile. That's a that's a tough word. You know, this is not an investment for the faint of heart. When you invest in Tesla, you know what you're getting into. It isn't a pretty picture when you're investing in a company that has a massive, PE ratio, or is basically overvalued on every metric. I don't think Square is as overvalued as Tesla, but when I see a company, I want to see a kind of like a landing strip opportunity. In the same way that I saw Peloton. Like there's something about Peloton that I knew it was going to be successful simply because I have this observational virality factor to it. Especially when it comes to, I guess, living in California, or when my parents live in California, but it's a status symbol. It's almost like this cult. The fitness instructors are literally famous on like every social platform. People are wearing the shirts Peloton everywhere. They have stickers on their cars because they want to show people that they're Peloton riders. So with Square, I kind of give it. I would say that I'm a fundamental investor at my heart, but I'm not a Warren Buffett. I want to buy the company because it's super undervalued. I just think there's so many things going in the right direction that does reconcile it. The growth of Cash App reconciles it alone, in my opinion. I mean, I don't want to get too nuts on you guys, but like I can just list off like the growth of Cash App is just incredible in my mind.
Yeah, that user growth, I've seen that chart where you look at some of the other companies and just how fast they're growing users. It's insane. It looks like, you know what it looks like? It looks like QE in 2020. That's kind of a comparison. Okay, so switching back to social sentiment real quick. Square has just won its matchup, which means it moves on to the Elite Eight. The Elite Eight will be happening on Monday. All 4 matchups will be happening, and is going to either match up with SE or with PLTR. Which one does it want to match up with and why?
Can you repeat that last part?
My last part was it's going to either have to match up with SE, so C Limited, or PLTR, Palantir. Yeah. Which one does it want to match up with, or which one does it not want to match up with, and why?
In my opinion, I don't think it want to match. It definitely doesn't want to match up with SE. On a lot of reasons. I'm bullish on SE, C Limited, because they just have so many avenues, just kind of like Square in a way where it has an ecosystem of opportunities for growth. C Limited has this Shopee e-commerce wing. They have this AI wing. They have this gaming wing. It's kind of becoming this monolith. So I don't think that I don't think Square would want to match up with them. I think they will, because I think,
so that
Palantir versus SE
so it's Palantir versus SE right now. It actually has a lot of votes in comparison to some of these others. It's already at 673 votes, and right now SE has 50.7% of the vote. So it's leading by like 1%. If you're sitting on this call and you haven't voted yet, go to my page, go vote. You might be the one to swing this. Honestly, the Square vote was decided by like less than 5 votes. So yeah, SE versus PLTR is super tight right now. There's already been 11 retweets on that one matchup. Basically, the 2 big sides of that is we have Parrot is really the SE champion, along with a couple of others. Uncommon Yield has been sharing it, a couple of others, and then Runaway Investor has really been the big PLTR bull, cash on that side. And I just want to say, PLTR, Square's had an interesting pass so far. No, SE has an interesting pass. SE beat Apple in the first round. Then it beat Twitter in the second round on Twitter, so not that easy. But PLTR beat Zoom, and then it beat Tesla. So it's not like I don't think I could call either an underdog here. They seem like a pretty strong matchup, and just 19 hours left in this poll, so early data, but already almost 700 votes.
I think I don't know Palantir super well, and the funny part is I don't think anyone does. This is a company that is kind of secretive, right? It feels kind of like a Lockheed Martin type, Raytheon type company where it's just like deep contracts with the government or whatever. I could be completely wrong on this, of course, but it feels like the sentiment's starting to change. But I don't like betting against companies that have government contracts. Palantir has a lot of government contracts, right?
Yes, they do. That is their largest client.
Right. I went to a military service academy. I know a good amount about military contracts and government contracts, and I can say, once the government latches onto a company, it's got to go really, really wrong for them to lose that contract. Like it's a very bullish indicator, So, and I think the CEO of Palantir he got asked a question. He was like in it wasn't a podcast or anything, and he had really good responses. He was, basically saying along the lines of like, why wouldn't you want to work with the government? I'm gonna butcher it trying to regurgitate what he said, but look it up. It's pretty interesting, and I think the sentiment has started to change.
Yeah, 100%. If anybody in the crowd, first of all, funny, very, very funny thing. As I just said, Parrot is backing SE. He literally DM'd me that minute and said, "Hey, sorry I'm missing out. I really wanted to hear you and Gannon talk, but I got pulled into a meeting at the 9 to 5." So literally at that minute, which was weird. But if you are anyone listening, if you're a big SE or a big PLTR bull, just go give that a retweet. Throw your shout out Landon Thomas for coming in there and saying we need more SE fans. If you like PLTR, I'm sure it could use some love one way or the other. Please just go ahead and share that. So I think that's a lot on Square. We definitely hit on a ton of different areas. I know that you don't have a ton of time, but maybe let's do like 10, 15 minutes on PENN. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
One last thing I want to touch on SE just real quick.
SQ
investment
or
talk?
SE?
No,
Okay.
SE Limited. And if you guys don't know anything about SE, just look up Investment Talk. His Twitter. He has a paid newsletter, but it was a free newsletter. His whole coverage of SE is incredible. So look up that newsletter if you don't know anything about SE. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I will just second that. Investment Talk really knows what he's talking about. So you really can't go wrong checking that out. And also Gannon knows what he's talking about. So if you're not following Gannon yet, maybe you're someone from my audience, just go ahead and give Gannon a follow. Probably one of like the first 15 people that I've been following since I got onto Twitter. And it was definitely paid off. And look at this now, we're chatting. So love to see it. Hope that gets you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, hope that gets you some follows.
Likewise. No, likewise.
Yeah, so let's chat a little bit about PENN. I'm super bullish on PENN. I love sports betting. I had a rough sports betting patch back in like 2019, and I don't sports bet as much anymore on things that I don't know about because I just got into it. I was like, oh, college basketball parlays, let's go. And then I just realized that's not me. And now I stick to like NFL, a little bit of NBA, some playoff basketball. But PENN, and I talked about this with Stock Market Nerd the other day, like PENN and Barstool have this thing going now where it's this match made in heaven. And talk to me about what the DNA of PENN is and how it changed when they acquired part of Barstool.
Oh, for sure. Where to start? I mean, I'm going to start from the beginning. 10 years ago, if you went on SportsCenter and watched a game, you wouldn't hear anyone talking about betting on the game. You'd have that like one or two announcers that at the very end of the game would go, "Ooh, someone just lost under." Make like a sly comment. I believe there's one announcer in particular who did that. Can't remember his name, but and now you got full on betting shows like on live television. So in a way, it feels like prohibition's over, but instead it's like for gambling. People are much more open about gambling. SportsCenter or all these TV shows are much more into it. Barstool's obviously always been into sports gambling. Pat McAfee, his show, the whole 9 yards. So PENN, is this gambling company, and they made literally the best acquisition of their lives, and they invested, they bought out PENN, but in reality, they bought Dave Portnoy, in my opinion, and that's why. So I wrote a newsletter called "The Battle of the Crown" between DraftKings and PENN, and what was super interesting was at the point that I wrote it is if you had bought PENN and DraftKings before April, just after January of 2021, you had been sitting at the exact same share price growth. So they've had, incredible runs. And I really wanted to like dive into that. What's going on here? Why are Penn and DraftKings doing so well? And I I see it kind of in a way in which it's like the marijuana industry, in which like marijuana industry can really kind of only have good news in the sense that like every time a new state opens up, makes weed legal, you know, weed stocks go up. And in the same way with these gambling companies, when a company, when a state legalizes sports gambling, all these companies go up. So for example, like online gambling launched in Michigan in January, and 9 apps had the approval. It was Barstool, DraftKings, FanDuel, Golden Nugget, yada yada yada, and these all these stocks reacted towards it. So like on a very basic level, you don't even need to know much about the company. If you're bullish on just gambling in general, or you're bullish on the sentiment change between gambling being hush hush, no one talk about it, but we're all actually looking at the game because we got $50 on the under, to now switching towards, okay, actually everyone's gambling, so why don't we just talk about it? It's interesting, it's entertaining, it itches that inner innate human being thing that we can't really quantify, but everyone just likes to put money on a game and see and hope you win.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, for anybody who hasn't sports bet, it's like you can be, let's say, I'm a 76ers fan. I went to college in Philly, and so I don't care about, I don't know, the Hawks or the Hornets. But if I put $5 on a team in that game, I am sitting there yelling at the screen for like an hour and a half. It just
Right.
changes the personality of people. And also on what you just said before, when you were talking about cannabis and the ways that people can get tax revenue, right? Sports betting is only really big in about 10 to 15 states. And I think it's so much less taboo
Right.
than cannabis. And when I was talking with Brad Freeman at Stock Market Nerd, one of his best points was, unfortunately, much of this country was ravaged by COVID. And so many small businesses and other places are gone. And now these governments need to figure out, how are we going to get revenue, tax revenue? And the best way to increase your tax revenue without having to build infrastructure, right, knock down buildings, do other stuff, is legalizing sports betting and cannabis. And if I had to take my guess, a lot of states are probably more comfortable with sports betting.
For sure. I would agree with that. You got definite cons. We're not going to go into the pros and cons of weed versus gambling addiction, but I would agree that people are more okay with throwing money on a sports game.
Yeah, 100%. So real quick, I just wanted to hit social sentiment. We might come back to a couple more things on the actual positivity, but in social sentiment world, Penn obviously is out. It lost to DMTK, but in its first round, it won its first round matchup in the round of 64, and it actually won a social sentiment match against DraftKings. So talk to me about Penn versus DraftKings and what that rivalry is like, and especially on the internet, how people think of these companies.
Yeah, well, this is falling right into my newsletter trap. I talked about Penn and DraftKings, and at the time that I wrote DraftKings, I would need to look at the most recent quarter, but they hadn't had a profitable quarter. DraftKings, my biggest reason why I would choose Penn over DraftKings, they both have pretty solid balance sheets. The biggest worry with Penn was their debt, but was just the intangibles. You have Dave Portnoy, you have unlimited advertising, you have every employee of. I don't know if you guys remember when Barstool Sports during COVID, at the very beginning of COVID, they were like, okay, we need to sell as much t-shirts as we possibly can. And Dave was like shouting or like doxing his own employees, saying like, hey, why haven't you tried to sell any t-shirts? And so they're saving a lot of money by literally, DraftKings doesn't have these. DraftKings employees aren't these social media figures, and Barstool Sports are. Every employee for Barstool has to have a social media presence. They have to have tens of thousands of followers. And at any moment in time, if Dave Portnoy needs more sales, okay, let's flick on the selling mode light, and they can just get sales just like that, and that saves a lot of money, versus DraftKings. Okay, we got to put up more billboards, I guess,
Right.
on Highway 51.
And on that
Right.
note, right, what you're saying right now, you become so much more efficient with your marketing because think about it from this perspective. If Penn has, I don't know, $15,000, let's say, for a marketing campaign, spending that through their means or just giving that money to Barstool and saying market us, think about how much more efficient one is than the other.
Right.
Really just takes it to the next level. So
Definitely.
let's flip back. Let's flip
definitely.
back to some of the financials real quick because you mentioned their massive amounts of debt. How do you see that affecting them over the next 5 years?
Yeah. Most recently, the last number I saw was, I believe it was like around 10 billion or something along those lines. I don't see it as that big of an issue in my opinion, because do you see Barstool Sports going away in 10 years? And and I know for a lot of people who are bullish on Penn, they kind of cringe at referring to Penn as Barstool Sports, but in reality, I think you should embrace it. I think Penn should even change their name to just Barstool Sports. Like, I think that's why they acquired
They
it.
should change the ticker to BSTL. They would get a lot more
Yeah,
investments.
Barstool or just Dave, right?
Dave, oh my God! All right, Josh, my analyst, write that one down too. That's another tweet that we're putting out today.
Hey, you're stealing all my tweets. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm totally kidding. But you do have that aspect, and I think the biggest thing about Penn too is just they are so non-traditional. When you go on CNN, when you go on Fox News, when you go on anywhere, ESPN, whatever, you know what to expect. You know what you're gonna see, and anything can happen. On Barstool, they're masters at creating drama, for views. And people are just sick and tired of just the nonchalant. Okay, this is what happened in the news. Blah 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 blah. They really like Barstool.
Absolutely.
That's what I have to say about that.
So I don't know how much you've been looking into this. I know that if you really want a deep dive on the numbers, I'm uploading to my Spotify. I actually just pushed it yesterday, so hopefully it's up there within 24 hours. My podcast that I did with Brad Freeman, where he went super deep in the numbers. But from what you've looked at, Gannon, they're moving into new states, right? New states have legalized sports betting. I actually know that Maryland just they voted to legalize, but I think Michigan opened, and Dave goes and he does a pizza review and a promotion as well for them, right, when they're getting to states.
Yeah.
Have you seen those numbers of the market share that they're grabbing in new states that they're moving into?
Penn for 2020. Here's what I'll say about that. For 2020, Penn did, $3.5 billion in revenue, right? Which, scared a lot of people off because in 2019 they did 5.3 billion. But in my opinion, for their company, I think it was pretty fantastic, considering all the things that just pandemic and everything. 2018 to 2019, they went from 3.5. So it's like they kind of moved back 2 years. I downloaded the Penn app, or sorry, I guess this is the Barstool Sports app, and I wasn't able to use it. I live in Texas. But I think they're just going to continue to move in that direction where they're just going to try to get every state possible. I don't know the exact states that they're hunting down now. But isn't that more of on just a legalized legislative level than what they're actually doing? Or I would love to hear if people have any input on sports gambling legislation. That's on a whole different level. And for anyone out there, you have to remember, I'm bullish on the sports betting industry. I'm not necessarily like a huge Penn bull. That's why like I'm more on the general aspect of it. That's why I own Bets, which owns DraftKings, owns Penn, like owns multiple sports betting things. So like not on the very granular level as some people are like, okay, we have 20% growth in Michigan versus last year it was 10%, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hear that. And also, I own Bets as well. For anyone that's unfamiliar with Bets, BETZ, it is a sports betting ETF. They hold things like Penn, DraftKings, and several others as well in there, made by Roundhill Investments. You might have seen Will Hershey. He's a pretty popular figure in our community, and I'm a big fan. I have that one as well as Nerd and a couple of others. Real quick, Gannon, let's bring up one more person just ask a question, and then we're probably going to close out in the last 5 minutes. But do you see
Yeah.
risk versus return? Or risk versus reward versus reward.
Got it. He's in.
Okay, let's throw them that invite. Hopefully they accept. Sounded like they had a question regarding Penn and sports betting and cannabis as a whole. So, all right, here they are. Floor is all yours.
Hey, thanks, Wolf. I've been speaking to Gannon too recently, and honestly, this fits right in with what I've been writing about, which is, I recently wrote about it, and before I say this, I'm a big bull in sports betting and cannabis overall, but it can be hard on Twitter because we're now talking about it as it's going on. So, like, what I struggle with is I parked in these places, years ago. I was a Penn investor, before they got before they bought a third of Barstool, just because who could they potentially merge with? Where could this potentially go? When will it go online? My friends would bet in high school, I guess, before you guys, or most people seem to be. You guys said it wasn't really around as big 10 years ago, but I feel like I've been, even since like junior high, we were betting on things, just you and a friend. But the big thing I had here is I wrote a piece on confirmation bias and basically addressing the fact that I loved all of these companies last year. I bought into DraftKings' Diamond Eagle acquisition. I bought into Penn before they merged with Barstool, and I loved when it jumped on the announcement, and then it fell to $4 as COVID came, and of course soared back. But then they added $10 billion to their valuation, and they only own a third of Barstool. We all agree that we're investing because of Barstool, not because of Penn. So I dipped probably at like 60. Obviously, I'm the one being laughed at now, but I moved to all the operators. Canby gets a little bit on all the different books, and GAN. I'm investing specifically in all the companies that can get a piece from all these different sports book operators and not have to compete with them individually. I don't know how you can invest in Penn because of Barstool when they only own a third of Barstool and paid $450 million for it a year ago, and now you're saying that $450 million is probably worth upwards of $10 billion. That sounds crazy to me, and I just am curious. I don't know. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
So real quick on that note, then I'll turn it to Gannon to really answer the thoughts on that. But they do have plans to acquire the rest of Barstool. I read it.
Well, they do for how much?
So that's a great question. I have not seen the exact numbers. I know that they already have basically contracts in place to take the majority stake, and then plans to acquire the whole thing.
So 100%. I just don't know how that works, and I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So I can kind of cover that a little bit. Penn National Gaming announced that it invested $163 million in Barstool Sports for a 36% equity stake. The $163 million consisted of $135 million in cash and $28 million in stock, and included warrants that would entitle Penn to majority control if exercised after year 3. So that would be above a 50% holding.
Yeah. So
if exercised, so they're gonna have to pay for it, right?
Exactly, and I'm just curious how much they have to pay for it, because I don't. Everyone's just saying Barstool, but Barstool was really, really attractive. In the small 100 millions. Now, if you attribute the majority of this gains to Barstool, even if you attribute half the gains to Barstool, that means Barstool is now a $15 billion company. I'm not, of course, the synergies together is what boosts the, joint affair. But if the company, if Barstool, if Penn stock goes up 10 billion in market cap, and at one point it was up 15 billion in market cap because of this acquisition, then you have to attribute a certain amount of that to Barstool. And I don't know how much you attribute to it, but Barstool is now worth billions. And that means that they're worth 10, 15 times more than I got them for a year ago. And so buying them now, I struggle with. Like you guys, I own through bets now, and I take puts on them every time they go up big, and that's been one of my best moves this year is puts on DraftKings and Penn every time they run. And I have calls on all of the other casino companies. I have calls on Gannon and calls on Rush Street Interactive and Golden Nugget and all of them because they're the ones that are going to get bought. In my opinion, I mean, this is just, again, I'm another one of you guys sharing my opinion.
Risk, you outlined extremely good points. I will say, this company is not perfect. I want to say that, Penn manages 41 properties across 19 states. In 2019, yeah. Penn alone brought in $5.3 billion in revenue. It generated $1.4 billion in EBITDA. For 2019. So, for people who are extremely bullish on Penn and holding Penn, you can't just focus on Barstool. I 100% agree with that. And it's really funny that you brought up the trade that you made. Excellent trade, by the way. Going to 60. That you can't shake your head at that. That's an incredible lifetime trade right there. My cousin, for instance, this is a true story. I wouldn't make this up. He doesn't know shit about the stock market, and he bought Penn in a sizable position at $4, and he got to 35, and he's like, "What do I do?" And I was like, you should probably take some off the table."
Yeah.
So he took some off the table, got to 60. I said, "You should probably take more off the table. This is pretty, high market cap here." Definitely. And, he ended up exiting the full position around 60. And, so don't kick yourself for that. I mean, I would exited, and I know you're not, but I think for someone who's exclusively, investing in Penn and Penn alone, you really have to look at the Penn side of the business as well, not just the Barstool side of the business.
And that's why I bought Penn before they merged, right? I was there at 25, in 2017 or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Sorry, I was on mute. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I've been messaging you personally. We've been talking, and I'm the type of person that parks myself in these places, way before. And then when it takes off and everyone seems to own it, I start getting shaky. So in terms of, basically everything we're discussing, I mean, I even messaged you about Ethereum. I bought Ethereum at $80 in March of last year, and now everyone's buying at 2,000. I mean, let's not go into, I mean, I don't need to drag this into crypto, but I feel like that's the story of my life right now is, jumping into these things 18 months ago and now seeing everyone looking to buy. And I read a piece from Morgan Stanley talking about DraftKings 5-year highest bull case upside when I had bought DraftKings at $10 was 5 years from now, they had a $75 price target, right? We already hit that. And that was based on, best case scenario in the sports betting market. Now, I thought they underestimated personally. But that was also a 5-year out projection. We're now 8 months later, and it's already at that 75 number. I mean now 60 because it's fallen, but I struggle to, push the lead horses when I think that the move seems to be push the horses they're going to acquire.
For sure. I mean, again, I would not go out there, in my opinion, to say buy Penn right now. I'm more speaking about the 10-year landscape of Penn.
Yeah.
I think there's, you have to look into the opportunity cost of, just like Bitcoin, kind of pointing back to Bitcoin. Do you want to invest in Bitcoin if your bull case is 100K by end of 2021, or do you want to invest in Ethereum where, a lot of people's bull case is 10,000 or whatever, something crazy.
Yeah.
We already seeing Penn's stock cooling off a significant amount. At one point, it hit the 140 range. So there are those concerns that this thing hit a little too high of a note. And last thing I'll say too is, is like how does Dave Portnoy get away with these tweets?
Yeah.
Some of these tweets are just outrageous. I'm studying for my Series 65 right now, where he's just like straight up being like, buy PENN. He doesn't say that outright, but it's pretty ridiculous, some of the tweets that he has. I'm just like cringing. Like, do you have any SEC people on your in your camp that know about SEC rules? Like, hey, you need to cool it on your PENN tweets, especially when he's using the PENN ticker symbol. And I don't want to cut anyone off, but in about 7 minutes, I have my tax Zoom appointment.
I was going to wrap it up.
Wolf, you wrap it up.
Yeah, that was perfect. I think that we covered a lot of stuff here. We talked about Square. We talked about PENN. We dove a little bit into Square's fundamentals, explaining their user growth, explaining their R&D, thinking about them from a social perspective, what they're doing with Bitcoin, with Jack, with a lot of different areas. And then we touched on PENN as well, where we were understanding this acquisition of Barstool, PENN as a standalone company, some of their growth numbers as well, what they're doing with their debt, and some of those other areas. So I thought this was super informative. It's fantastic. I've done pods on both of these, studied them. I own both of them. I've been in PENN since around $6 at the low of March is when I bought in. And thank you. I sold some at 80, but I'm still in. With some others, just because I love sports betting. I own PENN, I own DraftKings, I own bets. Can't get away from it. Find things that you're passionate about and invest in them, right? As long as you believe in the model as well. So that's kind of what's going on for me. Gannon, I really want to just thank you for two things. One, for doing this with us, educating, giving value to this community. I think that there's so much value in these spaces. And then number two, for hosting the space, because I was supposed to host and apparently there's something with Android has just been glitching out. I was on a call with Twitter for about 20 minutes this morning, just giving some feedback and talking with them about what's been going on. So thank you for both of those things and for taking the time. And I'm really looking forward to our next chat.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And, risk versus reward is a real deal. I mean, that guy, I've been in a lot of DMs with him. He's been hitting the numbers really right with his predictions. Wolf as well, shoot him a follow. I mean, he's bringing all these FinTwit names together, and he's building a great community. And, thank you guys so much. And thank you for being patient with me with my answers. I'm not a full-time analyst. I do this stuff for fun. But